No one is going to believe this, but I swear it's the truth. I can talk to the dead. Well, more accurately, they can talk to me. They never respond to any of my questions. They just tell me how they die and then go silent. The first time it happened was around a year ago. It was quite the scare, as you can imagine. I was alone with the corpse of an old woman in the funeral home I work at. We're the only funeral home in the area, so we're always busy. I was preparing the body for burial and had my back turned to the corpse, looking for something. Suddenly, from behind me, I hear a whisper. I thought I had more time. I turned around in a flash. The old woman's corpse lay where I had left it, eyes shut. Silence hung in the air for a moment. Then, its mouth began to move. It was lung cancer. I died in a hospital surrounded by my family. It was nice. After it spoke, it went back to being a quiet corpse for good. What followed was a long period of doubting my own sanity. Every corpse that entered my funeral home from that day onwards would speak to me in hushed whispers about how they died, when I found myself alone with them. As sanity-distorting as it was, I couldn't do much about it. I'm good at my job, there's nowhere else I want to work, and I can't just go around telling everyone the dead speak to me without getting locked up somewhere. So, I just got used to it. Or as used to it as you can get, anyways. As terrifying and chilling as it was when it happened the first time, by the 40th time it just became an uneasy routine, as part of the job as anything else. However, there have been some recent corpses that are just off. The first time I encountered one was 2 months ago. I was going through my usual burial preparation for an old man when his corpse began to whisper to me. I lived alone in an old family house. My children had moved out decades ago and my wife passed away last year. I always make sure to listen to them as I work, as an act of respect. It threw me down the stairs. It said I was going to be a present. I froze. This old man's body was found at the bottom of his house's staircase by his visiting daughter. Now, my full attention was on the corpse. I waited for some elaboration on what it just said, but there was nothing but silence. I felt a chill run up my spine as I questioned if I had heard the words right. I'm ashamed to admit this, but curiosity got the better of me, and I asked the daughter of the old man if she had noticed anything strange when she found him. She gave me a weird look and said there was nothing strange about him, besides the terrified expression that was frozen on his face. Eventually, my unease subsided and the next corpse didn't say anything out of the ordinary, which gave me a morbid sense of relief. 2 weeks later, I'm preparing the corpse of a young woman for burial. The corpse spoke as I was writing down measurements for the coffin. My family has a long history of heart problems. I was 32. The heart attack was so sudden. Again, I make sure to listen intently as I work. This one struck a chord with me. It's uncommon to have such a young corpse enter a funeral home. I remember feeling uniquely sad for this one. Its face scared me to death. Now I'm a present. You're present. I felt my blood freeze. The silence in the air suffocated me. An impending sense of doom shot through me as I scanned the dark corners of the room. Nothing. I took the rest of the day off. I felt sick. When I got home to my apartment, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and poured myself a drink to ease my nerves. The same words kept repeating in my mind over and over again. You're present. A couple of weeks pass and things go back to normal again. Until last week. I was about to put the corpse of a middle-aged man in storage until the day of his cremation, when the whisper started. It wants to know why you don't open your presents. I put it in storage before it said anything else. I took the rest of that day off. I felt sick again. I really don't know what to do. I've had to take extended sick leave. My anxiety is through the roof. I can't talk to anyone about this without them thinking I'm crazy. So, I just have to get this all out anonymously online. I don't know who or what the hell is behind this, but I have a feeling this won't be the last present I'll receive. My deaf girlfriend got a hearing assist dog, but the dog keeps alerting her to sounds that aren't there. My girlfriend and Naya had to wait nearly a year before finally getting matched with an energetic black lab named Trixie, but there were problems with our specially trained hearing dog from the get-go. How a hearing assist dog is supposed to work. Someone knocks at the front door, and the dog informs the owner, in this case, my girlfriend Anaya, by nudging her wet nose into her owner's leg. What? Anaya asks, spreading her hands. Where? Then, the clever dog leads her to the source of the sound. Properly trained, a good hearing dog can alert its owner to the microwave, oven timer, doorbell, smoke alarm, any sound she's trained to recognize. Trixie the Black Lab, we were assured, was one of the brightest dogs to ever come out of her training program. But she was a little too bright, because she developed an unusual habit, alerting to sounds before they happened. The first time, I was sitting on the sofa typing on my laptop when Trixie's head came up, ears perked, telltale signs of an impending alert. She raced over to Anaya, tail wagging, and nudged her, then led her to the front door. I frowned because I definitely didn't hear any knocking or the bell. Anaya dutifully looked at the people and then turned to Trixie and scolded, "No!" She walked back to me and sighed. "False alert. She gave me one this morning while you were in the shower, too." False alerts can be a problem with hearing dogs, alerting to sounds that just aren't there, hoping to get treats. But Trixie just stood by the door and whined, stubbornly, as if insisting she was a good dog who'd done her job. I was about to suggest to Anaya we contact the Assistance Dog Organization for advice when I almost jumped out of my seat. "There's someone at the door," I told Anaya. Trixie wagged her tail as we both hurried over, her tongue lolling in a puppy smile as we opened the door to find a UPS driver holding a package, and a FedEx notice on the door as well. After pulling the notice off the door, Anaya turned to me. "Gosh, maybe it wasn't a false alert this morning. Maybe she just alerted me too early, like now." "She must have heard the package carrier's footsteps on the sidewalk," I guessed. I marveled at Trixie. "Man, she's got phenomenal hearing." "Guess that's why they call them hearing dogs," joked Anaya. We gave Trixie her treat and told her good girl. She ran a few triumphant circles before fixing us again with that doggy smile. From then on, every alert came early. Some of them made sense with her insanely good hearing, or, as in the case of the smoke alarm, she alerted Anaya to a minute before it went off. Possibly it was due to her sensitive nose picking up the burning of the French toast. But the oven timer? How was she able to alert early to that? The phone ringing? Anaya seemed unconcerned. She simply declared that Trixie was a very special dog, but I found Trixie's early alerts to border on the uncanny. It was as if she was hearing the sounds before they happened. And then came yesterday. Anaya was called into a work meeting, and since her boss has severe allergies to dogs, she left Trixie at home with me. I was sitting at the table on my laptop, working on some reports when I felt a wet nose nudge my leg. I got up to ask Trixie what the sound was. Even though I'm not deaf, it's still a good idea to give Trixie the consistent practice. And she led me to the door, where I stood, fully expecting to hear a knock or the bell in about a minute. Then, Trixie growled. For context, I never heard her growl before. She makes lots of sounds. Whimpers, yips, and funny moans like she's talking, but she's a very good-natured pup and doesn't have a vicious bone in her body. Yet now, she stood tense, head down and tail lowered, the hackles along her back raised, lips curled to show sharp teeth. She continued to stare straight at the door, as if it weren't there and she could see right through it. And suddenly it struck me that whatever made her growl like that would be here at the door in seconds. Panic hit me. I snatched Trixie by the collar and dragged her with me into our hidden closet under the staircase, the one we call our Harry Potter closet. I whispered to Trixie, "Lie down," and, "Quiet." A soft growl continued to emanate from her. But I put my hand on her and she quieted until she was almost inaudible, though I could still feel the vibrating deep in her body. There was the jingle of keys in a lock, and the front door opened. Footsteps. The cadence of those footsteps sounded like Anaya? But Trixie's low growl persisted. There was a small hole in the paneling of the stair closet, and I tried to peep through it, but all I could make out was a vague figure in the front entryway. Then the figure moved. The footsteps went up the stairs. Thump, 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 into our bedroom, and the door closed. I heard the creak of the bed as Anaya, or someone else, laid down for a nap. My heart would not slow. Trixie was still growling. I heard her lick her lips in the dark. But why if it was Anaya? I sent a quick text. "Hey, where are you?" Anaya responded, "Home. You?" Relief flooded my system. I almost came out then, but Trixie's soft whine stopped me, so I looked at my phone and hit the call button. I just needed to see my girlfriend signing on a video call, or hear her voice. Upstairs, a merry jingle rang. Trixie jolted at the familiar ringtone. It was one of the sounds she was trained to alert to. Her nose dipped as if to nudge me, but then instead she licked her lips and stood still. For some reason, she didn't want to alert. Why wasn't Anaya picking up? After the call went unanswered, I sat for a moment, and then my phone vibrated with a text. It was from Anaya. "Hey, where are you?" I remained still, heart hammering, trying to decide what to do, when suddenly Trixie lunged past me, slamming into the panel door and bursting out from under the staircase. "Hey!" I hissed, darting after her, but instead of running upstairs, Trixie ran straight to the front door. She scratched and pawed at the door as there came a knock, and a voice from outside called, "Hello? Rosie? I lost my purse. My phone and my keys were in there. Can you open the—" At the same time, just overheard, the bed creaked as someone stood, Footsteps thumped rapidly across the floor. I yanked open the door and lunged out. Anaya stood startled on the front step, and I snatched her hand, dragging her with me into a run. Trixie ran beside us. "What's going on?" cried Anaya. "There's someone in the house," I gasped as we pelted up the block. We didn't stop until we spotted a neighbor walking his dog. I fumbled with my phone and called the police and told them, frantic, out of breath, that someone was in our house. A stranger, with a key, in the upstairs bedroom. I signed as I spoke, and Anaya's eyes on me widened. Police arrived in a few minutes, but when we went back inside and searched upstairs and down, we found no trace of any intruder. Just Anaya's phone left by the bed. It had no one's fingerprints on it but her own, nor had we seen anyone leave the house after our escape. We're staying with my parents now. We're still not sure who was in the house. After the whole strange incident, we're not taking any chances by going back. To be honest, I haven't really fully processed it all yet. I still don't understand how Trixie does those early alerts, either. But all that matters is that thank God nothing terrible happened that day. Or should I say, thank dog. I think my roommate is a cannibal. For context, I met Thomas when we were randomly assigned to be roommates our freshman year of college. Nothing seemed to be off with him back then. Yeah, he was out a lot and came back late at night, but I always figured he was just having fun with friends. It's not like I wasn't doing the same. We had 4 semesters of living on campus. 2 years. In that time, he never struck me as particularly eccentric. Maybe a few little things, like how we never put any food in our mini fridge, but nothing that warranted genuine concern. It wasn't until we moved into an apartment that things started to become strange. I moved in about a week after he did, a few days before classes were going to start. I was supposed to come in at the same time, but my aunt died and I needed to help my dad with some aftermath there. It would have kept me longer had the start of the semester not snuck up, but that's beside the point. We viewed the apartment together initially, and it was a pretty nice, cozy place. Not exactly modern, but sure as hell cheap enough to make it worth it without said price being shady. Neither of us were bothered. But when I was finally able to move in, the place looked worse for wear, somehow. Significant enough that I noticed immediately. The paint in some places had started chipping severely, something Thomas didn't even react to when I pointed it out. The floors were mostly fine, but a few of the boards creaked particularly loud, which I hadn't noticed at our viewing. Again, enough that it bothered me, and still not enough for Thomas to give a damn about it. Then there was the fact that the lock to the remaining bedroom, mine, was broken. A problem not very easily fixable on a college budget. I asked Thomas about that one, making sure he actually answered me, but he kind of just shrugged it off and told me he hadn't noticed it. But still, okay, whatever, weird, but probably not a big deal besides losing our security deposit. It didn't matter. The semester started, and the weeks progressed, and that was when I started noticing things about Thomas. Living in an apartment instead of a dorm was the most distant he'd ever been. It's not like he was ever super talkative, but now it seemed like he'd only glance my way and move on, and willing to do more. In fact, he only really talked to me if it was to snap at me about being clean or quiet. With the former, he was only a little bit of a clean freak back in our dorm, incessant about his own side, but he only got really pressed about it if any of our mess seeped into his. Here and now, though, it really shined through how bad it was. He never touched my room or anything, but the rest of the apartment had to be spotless, or he'd be pissed. A few times more recently, he's thrown out my stuff because I hadn't touched it in too long, whatever that means. Nothing devastating, but one of those things was a spare charger I had to dig out of the trash and then get sprayed down with Febreze for. Nothing short of annoying is what I'm getting at here. Why he suddenly became really anal about it was anyone's guess at that point. As for the being quiet part, there was an entirely new issue. Thomas never gave a damn if I was loud while playing a game before, but suddenly now it was worth slamming my door open without knocking over. I asked him to maybe be a little more polite about the issue when it came up, but I was again sort of just brushed off. Still, it rubbed me the wrong way how suddenly angry he was getting about the issue. Yes, it was my fault, and I got better about it, but what the hell was with the switch up? I still just wrote it off. Maybe he had some mental or emotional stuff going on he didn't want to talk about. I could be patient with him, sure. But it got worse. A roommate who clearly labels what food is his in the fridge is nothing to be mad about. Still, a few weeks into the year, I did a deep clean of the refrigerator, one that, to be fair, I had meant to do as soon as I moved in. But it was too late for that, and now I had to take everything out to scrub it down. Only a few things were his, most of them in the freezer. I took them out, setting them aside to clean it up quickly so nothing went bad. Probably no reason to worry about that, but whatever. Once I was done, I was checking over everything as I put it back in when I noticed something with his name on it had an especially pungent smell. It was awful enough that it made my nose instinctively wrinkle up. I put it back down, hastily shoving everything else back into the fridge before turning to it. Nothing really weird, just a piece of meat in tight saran wrap that looked to be still a little bloody. Frowning, I started unwrapping it to make sure Thomas hadn't put rotten meat in the freezer. The odor, though, only got more foul as I did. It was a smell difficult to describe, though it was what I was worried about. It didn't smell like rotting meat. It just smelled like death. Before I actually unwrapped the whole thing, it had a lot of layers, something I only questioned after the fact. Thomas came home and stopped dead in the doorway.
Why are you touching my crap?
He stormed over after a second, snatching the meat off the table and immediately starting to rewrap it. His hands were shaking. It smells disgusting, man, I told him, stepping back a little. I wanted to check if it wasn't rotten.
It's not. I'm on a diet,
he snapped.
Don't take my food.
I wasn't taking it, I hissed back.
Don't touch it!
Thomas stuffed the meat back into the freezer at that, then swiftly retreated to his room, barely opening the door and sliding through, leaving me to scrub my hands of that horrible stench. It was then that I really got suspicious of Thomas. The other weird things layered onto that incident that made me start observing him closer. I wasn't trying to stalk my roommate by any means, but looking past the surface made me notice some more things. How half the creaking boards were in front of his room, how he always slipped into his room like he was hiding something in there, that most of his labeled food had that same disgusting odor of death when I checked. Well, sniff dusted them. After the first time, I was a little scared to unwrap another one. Maybe it was stupid, but I'd read online somewhere that a reason for creaking floorboards could be that they had recently been lifted up. So, another little investigation started, this one intentional. When Thomas left for class, I started checking under the boards, and it wasn't long before I turned up something. A handsaw. Off-putting thing to be hidden under my feet, to say the least. It looked pretty well worn, clean but used. Aside from the saw, lifting the board let me see a mysterious reddish-brown blotch stained into the underside of it. That was enough for me to put the board back and stop thinking about it for now, at least until I could come up with a plan. I had a film major buddy, and I managed to convince him to let me use an old video camera of his for science. I hid it in a plant and aimed it at the door to Thomas's bedroom at leg level, set up to stay at a friend's house for the night, and then let it play out. In hindsight, a mediocre video camera was a really crappy pick for this, but it did the job enough. I didn't get a live feed or anything, and I was left to wallow in anxiety the whole night, but when I got back while Thomas was out the next day, I could dig the camera out and watch what it showed me. After charging it, anyway. It caught 8 hours of footage before dying. Most of it was nothing, which I sped through until Thomas was suddenly pulling up the floorboard. I jumped back and let the video play. Thomas walked into frame, emotionlessly kneeling down and yanking the floorboard up, pulling the handsaw out and putting it down again. He walked into his room, seemingly stowing it away, then left again for another hour or so. When he came back, there was a woman our age with him. They were talking quietly enough that the video camera didn't pick up the words, but I couldn't make a guess what it was about. They disappeared into his bedroom, the lock clicking loudly. It remained quiet for another moment before the worst, most horribly unsurprising sound met my ears. A woman's scream being cut short. I could barely watch the next 2 hours of footage, all that remained before the camera died. But I did. I sat there in horror, watching Thomas's legs walk between his bedroom, the kitchen, and the door over and over again. Bringing things, wrapping up pieces of meat, at one point near the end, stopping to sit at the table and eat something. I could only guess what. I think typing this out has helped me process it a little bit, but Thomas is going to be home from his class soon. I'm kind of terrified to leave the room when he's here. I'm worried he knows that I've got him figured out, or at least under enough suspicion to warrant police involvement. I can't confront him, that's a horrible idea, but I think I hear his keys jingling, so I'm going to have to pass him if I want to go to the cops. Wish me luck. If there's no update, well, you know what happened to me.